How do we normally do this?
We kind of just like say like, are we starting? Like, are we good?
Okay.
Like,
Are we good?
yeah, we're great.
All
Let,
right.
let's
All
let's
right.
get into it.
Hello, yes. Welcome back to the Lil RES podcast, also known as the Really Excellent Scheduling Podcast. It is 66 degrees and windy. Here's the gnocchi of the day. I'm putting it up on the screen for you. She was like loafing on the doormat, and I was like, "Oh, perfect." And I went to go take a picture of her, and then she just immediately got up and started wandering around and like would not stay still. So I got like a live action shot of me trying to take a picture of her while she was just walking around. So that's what you see on the screen there. Here's the hat of the day. It's my IBM Think cap. Do you remember this hat, Richard? I don't know if you remember this one.
Oh, I don't know if I do. Or maybe I saw it and I was just like, man, he's such a three thinker.
I got it. I got it in college. I volunteered at a research conference, and all the volunteers got like free merch from the different sponsors of the conference. And the only apparel item was the IBM Think hat, and I'm so hat pilled. I was like, oh, obviously I go for the Think hat. I used to wear it a lot, and then one day I had this like moment of realization. I was like, I just don't like the optics of being a guy walking around with a hat that says "Think" on it. It's like too
Yeah.
much. But
Yeah, that's
it's
so
like I
funny.
like black hats, so this maybe sometimes I'll pull it out. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm good. I was a little bit sad the past couple weeks, and I was like, I couldn't really figure out why I was like feeling off. And then I realized it was like because the weather's like we've been like it's
Mm,
been a winter, and like even on the East Coast where it is sunny, it still kind of adds up. You just kind of like it's just naturally like a little bit harder for me to like enjoy myself when it's like the sun's not as guaranteed.
mm-hmm.
But luckily, like Puxatawny Phil came through. It's pretty nice out today, and I was also just in Arizona. And even though I was waking up with like 5 hours of sleep because I still had to do work when I was in Arizona,
Uh-huh.
I was waking up at like 6 a.m. on like 5 hours of sleep. I still felt amazing because they had like a strong sun. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah,
Dude,
I'm fine. There's not a lot of issues. It's just like, I just needed sun.
yeah. The way the body responds so strongly to like sun as a signal for waking up, like camping sleep, Like you go camping
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you get dog shit sleep. Like, it's like terrible, but you wake up and you feel amazing because it's like super bright sun, immediately outdoors. Camping sleep always hits different.
The sun is like a 20x multiplier for like the 8 minutes of REM sleep you get. You're like,
Yeah.
I basically have 2 hours of REM, even though you got like 5 minutes, if
Yeah.
that. And how are you?
Thank you for asking, Richard. I am doing, let's see. I'm good. Like I think things were a little off and on for me like earlier in the winter, pre-solstice when it was still getting darker. I was definitely getting seasonal depression. I could just feel it the entire
Mm.
time. And it's so like I don't think it's literally right when the days started getting brighter, I started feeling better. Like I don't know, there's a placebo aspect to it all because I knew exactly when the solstice was because I couldn't wait for the days to get longer. But like right when we hit that pivot point, like without fail, the seasonal depression just slowly evaporated over the next few weeks, and then I was back to normal. Um, YouTube stuff is good. After the last video, I was like kind of burnt out for like a week and a half ish, maybe. Um, Proper burnt out for like a week, and then kind of an unproductive next week. But I'm in like a good spot right now. Like I'm feeling it, and I'm enjoying the editing, which is great. When editing is fun, like that's a really good spot to be in. So I'm looking forward to. I had a moment where I was like, this fucking sucks. And then I like watched it back like later that night and I was like, no, this fucking rules. And I was like, all right, we're good, we're good. Like it was like we are so what was it? It's so
We are
over.
so back. It's over.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
I
so
felt that
back.
graph so hard. It was like in the 24-hour span of time.
What do you think it is that makes you think it like it's what causes that shift for you? Have you identified that
It's
yet?
okay. I think it's pretty simple. I think it's that when you're in the middle of editing, you're like looking for all the things that can be wrong and that can be fixed, and you're just like, right, like I'll look at the timeline for like 4 or 5 hours, and I'm just like watching the same like small like period of footage over and over and over and over again, and every single time I'm watching it, I'm just thinking what's not working here, what needs to be better. And that's
Mm.
my mindset the entire time. And it takes a while for that to kind of like go away too. Like for the aim video, because every like second of that video is layers and layers and layers of work. What you see and what you don't see. By the time I was at the end of that video, like working on it, I had seen everything so exhaustively, there was like no spark left. Um, but for this video, there's fewer layers, so everything looks fresher. And I think once I'm like able to
Mm.
step away and look at it again, the big thing is it's like a total mindset thing. I was just in a mindset where I was willing to watch the video as like a piece of entertainment and not as like a thing to be criticized. Um, and and that's like all it takes, I think. Like if I'm in a critical mood and I start watching a video to like review it, like how good I think it is, I've started to just like stop myself because I'm like I'm just not going to enjoy this if I'm looking at this critically. I can't see it as like a viewer, so sometimes you're just not in the right headspace. But I happen to be in the right headspace, and I don't know, I think I get a little, I should be careful with this word. I think I get a little manic sometimes, where I feel like
Mm.
powerful euphoria for my work. But I don't actually think it's that unreasonable. I don't think I'm being deluded. I think when something's working, it's usually working, and I'm not the only one who feels that way.
Yeah, and there's like a special type of joy that comes in that pride that comes from when it hits right, when it's something you've created
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's like, oh damn, like I've created like a piece of entertainment. Like I've created something genuinely interesting. Like that's probably an experience that like not I mean, I don't know who watches our podcast. I don't have a full grip on the audience yet, but like that's like probably a really unique and really cool feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just good to. I'm does I don't think everybody feels this way, I guess, but I think the majority of people just value the crap out of like their own expressions. Uh, it's like that like business study where like you give somebody something and immediately it becomes more valuable in their mind. You know what I mean? If they
Mm.
have ownership
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like your own ideas, you have like ultimate ownership of, right? So like you see your own ideas like manifested and you're like, oh, this is like amazing.
Especially when it's something too where like you know where you started. I used to
Hmm.
when I used to send, well, I still do. I send voice memos every now and then, and I used to like be really anxious about sending voice memos because I like had to get it right on the first take, or like I would send multiple. And sometimes these days I'll listen back on like a voice memo I just recorded and like on like a one try, and I'm like, wow, like I've come so far.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I told a coherent story with structure, and I communicated it in the way that's like funny and interesting, and it's a very micro level of that, but I'm like, man, it feels good. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
created something that was like interesting for someone.
No, that's a craft. And as someone who receives your voice memos sometimes, I think you deliver a lot. You're good at dropping a good little nugget. Yeah. um
Awesome.
so Richard, where have we been? What's been going on? Why the gap?
Why the gap?
Why
Mm.
the gap? Okay, well, I think the TLDR is we were both away from home in a staggered fashion over the course of about a month and a half. And then we just didn't pick things back up. Is that
It's
a
true.
is that the explanation? And then I
Yeah,
think the
yeah,
seasonal
a hundred
depression maybe
percent.
compounded there a little bit. Um,
Which is funny too, because it's like I honestly always feel better after we get a podcast episode out. So
Oh
it
yeah.
probably would have been great if we had been recording. But
Yes, yes.
if we always did what was best for ourselves all the time, like we wouldn't be like human.
Yeah, isn't that horrible? Like we just have to live with our flaws. What the
Yeah.
heck?
Damn.
There's a okay, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent off what you just said. Okay, there's this like I don't know, there must be some like philosophy or something that explains this more cleanly than I'm about to. But there's like the emotional mind and the rational mind. I think a lot of people understand this. But I think there's a weird sense of like identity crisis between those two because like the emotional mind is what comes so naturally and automatically, but I feel like for most people the rational mind is what we is who we want to be, and we're usually not that, right? Um
Yeah.
and we just have to like live with that, and what everybody sees in the world, the majority of what they see will be your emotional mind, at least if they're interacting with you in real time. And you usually don't see people's rational mind unless they take the time to construct it because it doesn't come clean. And so I'm always basically my point here is that whenever I'm like interacting with people or whenever people have like personality flaws, I don't want to say flaw, but you know, when people have quirks or things, I'm always thinking, but what is this person's rational mind? Who do they want to be? This is how they are. This like the
Mm.
emotional mind, this is how they behave like automatically, but that doesn't mean that that's who they want to be. And I think we should try and take people for who they want to be because that'll help them become who they want to be. But it's also probably a more honest like way of viewing people as well, right? It's seeing them as like the whole of those things, even though experientially you're just gonna see their like okay, one example of this is like when public freakout videos happen, right? That's
Mm.
100 pure emotional
Emotional.
reaction.
Yeah.
You're only seeing one dimension of a person there, but I feel like the general consensus way of viewing those types of videos is like that's who this person is. And it
Hmm.
is who they are to some degree. Like maybe it's cherry picked, maybe they are like this on a day-to-day basis. But who do they want to be? Are they okay with the fact that they're like that? I feel like most people, like if you yell in public, I feel like you don't want to yell in public. It's embarrassing, right?
Yeah. Right.
Um sorry, little
That is
tangent there.
unless you're Yodi gang.
Yeah, yeah. Some people, some the people who lean into it, that's the interesting people who are like, I like that I do this. I want to do this more.
Yeah. I want to do this more. Yeah, 100%. Oh, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to the couple of people that commented on the Lil RES podcast
Yes.
YouTube videos because they were honestly kind of, at least for me, my motivation and excitement for getting back into this. I was like, oh wow, like we weren't just totally posting this into the void. That
I
rocks.
I agree. I agree. Seeing even a couple people like who are actually watching this makes the pod I feel more respect to the audience. I think when we started initially, it was so like we like so black boxed. I felt like cagey and apprehensive and very like it's like this is for us. But now that I know that
Yeah.
other people actually listen to it, it's like okay, this is for it's weird because each episode has like over 100 views, but in my head I'm like, oh, but on YouTube 100 views is nothing, so nobody's watching, nobody's listening. But that's like evidently not the case. I don't know how many people are actually listening still, but it's more
Right.
than not nobody. So if you're watching this, hello, or listening to this, hello, thank you. We'll keep it up. I think we can keep it going. Knowing that there's actual listeners is actually a good motivator to keep going.
Especially too when it's like 100 views. Those are like 100 people that are like along for the ride as well,
Yeah,
not
that's
just
true.
like people that just randomly stumbled upon, unless for some reason one of these videos gets picked up on some niche YouTube algorithm, which
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's they're not So a lot of the views, I mean, I haven't actually looked at the analytics very much, but I'm guessing that most of the views only watch for like 5 to 10 minutes. But you're right that a lot of those views are longitudinal, right? They're like one viewer across 5 videos watching the entire video is so different than the opposite of that. Obviously, but you know what I mean. um but yeah, so thanks for listening, y'all. Actually, I did want to talk about something related to that. I'm curious, Richard, what are your thoughts on a Discord server for people who listen? I've been asked to create a Discord server in general for like the Respite main channel. And I've always been apprehensive about that because I don't want to moderate a Discord server, but I also don't. I'm like weirded out by the idea of a Discord server about me. Like, okay, we're here for like me, but I don't want to be like, I don't know, that's odd, right? I guess for the podcast it's the same deal, but I think podcast has a more communal interactive vibe, whereas like my main
Yeah.
channel is just me releasing my videos, right? There's no
Right.
interaction there at all. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I'm the best person because I see every podcast I feel like out there that even remotely touches internet culture has a Discord server.
Yeah.
I've never been a big Discord community person. I mean, well, that's not true. I mean, I've been like a friendship Discord person. Like
Yeah.
I am in like 3 different groups that are like people just chatting. I've never been a part of a Discord group of like a larger thing. So I don't know what that entails and what that
Yeah.
even means and like getting into.
Yeah, cuz like I'm similar, like I don't like mesh with public discords well. Or I shouldn't say don't mesh well. I've never felt drawn to public Discord servers. I don't know if public's the right word exactly, but what you're saying is basically like the Discord servers I use are ones that are private and small.
Yeah.
Basically large group chats that are more featureful is
Yeah.
like how I use Discord. So the idea of like a more sprawling type of community is one that I'm like unfamiliar with, and to be honest, I don't even know if I would really engage with. Like, you ever been in
Mm.
like a big Discord server and you look at the general channel and there's like a couple messages a minute and you're like, I'm just never gonna follow this. Like, that's too much. That's too fast. Even a couple an hour is too fast. Maybe not. I don't know. But
I don't know how people manage to like keep conversation threads and stuff going there. It's crazy. It's impressive, honestly. So I understand the appeal in a sense. Back when I used to play old school, or it was just RuneScape back then. But back when I used to play RuneScape, they had these things called clan chats, and I
yeah,
would
yeah,
join public clan chats of like the most popular RuneScape celebrities. Shout out Zazima and anyone else. But they had like 200 people in them, which was the
yeah.
max
Mm-hmm.
that Jagex would allow. And there'd be 20 different conversations going. And I would look forward to checking in because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a community and you take your communities where you can get it. I just have not felt the need to get my community from a Discord server. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean that even remotely negatively. I think it's awesome. If I had more time at work, maybe I'd fuck around at like on like a Discord community server. But I think because we have like our boys chat and like we have like a lot of different like we have a bunch of different group chats that like keep me that like scratch the itch for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I'm in the. I've just never. I've never had like a plot of my social fulfillment be placed in like the internet domain, right? I think the internet has always been an extension of like existing relationships that I have and never like the primary form of my interaction. And again, like you said, I don't think it's a
Mm.
bad thing. I think it's perfectly fine for people to do that. It's just not what's familiar to me or to you. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Maybe if you have an opinion on this and you're listening, you can write a comment and let us know what you think. Because I actually would like to know what other people think. I also don't even know if there's enough people who are interested for this to even be a thing. But it's been a little bit on my thought because like Yeah, I'm more open to the idea of a Discord server for a podcast because, like you're saying, it's it's like so standard almost to have Discord servers for podcasts. Um, that because people have asked, maybe that's the version of a community I'm willing to entertain. But yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Surprise PSA. Surprise PSA. I want to talk about this. It's not important. Well, it's a little bit important. We'll be quick. So, how do I word this without sounding elitist or pretentious or like a dick? The average person does not understand how to read a research paper. And that's totally normal and fine and understandable because research papers are written in particular ways that also vary quite a bit field to field, but there is a general structure to things, or at least a general set of structures. Um, People don't know how to interpret research very well, and I constantly see in my day-to-day life, at least on the internet, my day-to-day internet browsing, I see people frequently misinterpret research papers, and it's not their fault, they don't know how to, but as someone who had to read dozens and dozens and dozens of research papers all the time, I think it's good to impart some knowledge on how to interpret some things. And I want to talk about one particular aspect of interpreting research, which is significance versus effect. Richard, I'm curious, do you know the difference between these two things?
Off the top of my head, I'm sure I'm familiar with some underlying fundamentals, but I couldn't give you an answer
Okay.
as to what
Yeah,
that
the
entails.
ideas are going to be very familiar, I think, to you. But this is important because if you don't know the difference between these two things, research findings can be very confusing or can mean things that you don't think they mean, or you can misinterpret them easily. So let me break it down quickly. So when you report a result, in general, there's going to be two different ways you'll talk about the magnitude of that result. So the first is the significance. So the significance, that's statistically based, and that's just how confident are we that this result is true. So it's a magnitude of confidence. So when something is reported as statistically significant, right? That means that it passes the confidence check well enough that we're pretty sure that it's true, or at least some version of it is true. That's confusing when it comes to English language because significant in our heads means a lot, right? So
Right.
when you see a research report that says, scientists find significant difference between people who drink tap water and people who drink filtered water, the difference maybe we're very confident exists, but moving on to the second part, effect, the difference might be small even if we're confident. And that's
Right.
effect or effect size. Effect is what is the like amount of difference or amount of, yeah, usually it's going to be like some kind of delta, but what is like the amount? Um and so uh like for like there's a lot of like medical research that finds lots of significance but finds small effect size for things. So like I think it's, what is it, one of the like aspirin or something like has a small chance of decreasing some medical condition. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever heard of this?
I think people take it for like heart attacks or blood
Yeah,
pressure.
it's
There's
something
there's
like
something it's
that.
for.
And there's a lot of research that shows that difference exists, but it's small, right? We're very
Hmm.
confident that it exists, but it's a small change. But if you care, you care. So you factor it into your health. Um, and sometimes research will have like low significance, so low confidence, but the effect size is massive, and that can be interesting because sure, maybe we're not statistically sure about something, but whenever you see a huge effect size, it means like, it means something. Maybe something went really wrong, but it
Yeah.
also could mean that something really interesting is here that we need to investigate from a different angle. um, so when you hear those two words, understand that in a scientific context, they mean particular things. I just want to share this with the world because I saw a Twitter thread the other day where a researcher was talking about significance and everybody was like trying to debunk what he said because they're like, oh, but it's not significant. But they were talking about effect size. And the guy was like, no, no, it's
Yeah.
significant, but the effect size is small. And nobody was understanding this because the guy didn't understand that he needed to break out of researcher speak to make it interpretable. Um, and this problem also exists, by the way, on the science end of things. If you want to communicate science broadly, you do need to change your language. That's just good communication.
We
Um,
do a bad job of that. We do a really bad job of that in society, I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like.
It's the curse of expertise. Have you ever heard that? Yeah, yeah.
I'm assuming it's like when you learn like or when you like get really good at a field, you forget what people know and
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah,
So like
exactly.
you're too like what seems rudimentary to you is still like 10 steps
Mm-hmm.
above like
Mm-hmm.
someone who has no clue what's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it all the
Ah,
time. It's because it's very interesting to me that like you can only know what you know and don't know. And you can't know what anybody else does or doesn't know. Like people can tell you, but that's just adding to your like repository of knowledge. You don't actually know what they know. I don't know. I think about it all the time because it's like everybody like fundamentally has to exist in their own world because your brain is tailor made for you and you will never ever get to experience anybody else's brain.
you you could use to go back to one of your old video analogies. Could you not use like AI to like bake like a Joe baseball of like a normal like if you were to ask like AI to like summarize something for you in like layman's terms, would it have a decent understanding on like what a basic person entails?
That is a funny question. I think yes, you could do that. As someone who uses ChatGPT a lot, spoiler alert to people who don't like AI. I'm sorry, I use it. I, I'm AI skeptical, but like if it exists, I'm gonna
You're
use
very
it.
AI. You're the most AI skeptical friend I have. Also, probably because you're the person that knows the most about AI out of all
Mm.
my friends. But you're also the heaviest user, which is I think a good balance to have.
Yeah, it's well, for me. It's like I just feel like I have to use it to know. But anyway, yeah, like I don't know if I would trust chat like the way where like AI is right now. I would not trust it to replace human feedback. I don't think it's good enough at that. But the more important thing I think is that the well, without getting too technical, the latent magical space that AI traverses every time it gives you an output. You can think of that as a brain, right? Neural networks and everything. Even if you get the output of the AI, navigating that latent space we'll never get to experience. I don't know. Maybe like I guess Elon wants us to be able to, but even the Neuralink chip is not enough. You need to like wholesale replace the brain, and like have you ever thought about how fucking crazy it would be to feel somebody else's brain? I don't even know how that would work, but like because like for example, the way you add numbers together, right? You have a neural pathway or some set of neural pathways that does that, and it's gonna be different than mine. So let's say my consciousness is in your brain and then I try and add 2 plus 2 together. It'd probably be like crazy whiplash the directions like my
Yeah.
reasoning is taking me, I'd be like, whoa, why is Richard thinking about pigeons every time he adds 2 plus 2 together? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what connections are going on there, but
Dude, I get messed up even just sometimes even just doing metacognition on myself,
yeah.
like kind of sends me into like a weird state. I can only imagine how much weirder that would be with like another person's way of thinking and stuff too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
exactly.
our brains, I feel like, or at least me personally, I'm not great at thinking at just like another person's thoughts. Oh, that's not true. Like I'm a sympathetic, like I'm not saying I'm an empath like type
Yeah.
deal, but like as I'm like if I'm sitting on like a corner watching people go by, the idea that they're all having their own like dialogue and discourse and thinking inside their head, just like it starts to just like stress me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
No, yeah,
I'm just like,
because
what the hell?
we like can't, we just physically cannot conceive of that. We can only understand the
Yeah.
concept, but we can't ever know what it feels like. It's very
It's
weird.
almost like FOMO a little bit for me
Yeah.
sometimes. I'm just like, I just want to know.
Dude, I know what you mean. Yeah, dude, because whenever, especially, the type of person where it's like, how do they see it so differently? I want to
Yeah.
know, like, what do they see?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know. We just to take it back to Yodi Gang. I want to know what Yodi
Yeah,
Gang thinks about.
what's
Like,
going on? It's like a more like people get tripped up by that thought experiment of like, oh, everybody might see different colors, right? And that is such a
yeah.
simple one, like that's one aspect of things, and that alone is trippy to think about. And then when you think about like, but color is like very literal, very controlled. When we get to the more complex, like abstract elements of thought, it's like, I mean, again, you can't. It's impossible to actually think about what it would be like because we just can't. But
And because we're all different, I agree. Like that's also like what makes it so special when we identify like human patterns. Like what is it, the Boba Kiki study or whatever it was?
oh, the Boba Kiki
Like,
study, yeah.
yeah.
Do you want to share what the Boba Kiki study is for those who might
Oh,
not know?
you can explain it better than I can. You're good
I
with
think
it.
you
I
do a good
forget.
job. No, I'm challenging you. You gotta.
All
You
right,
gotta
all
do
right, all right.
it.
So there were two different shapes. So this was a study,
Mhm.
and there were people were shown two different shapes and two different names. One was Boba and one was Kiki. The shapes, one of them was more like it was more softer edges, like more like looked like a cloud or something
Yeah, it
like
looked like a
that.
cloud.
And the
Yeah.
other, yeah, and the other one was like if you picture a comic book, like when a character's yelling or like it says like boom, pow, or whatever,
Mm-mm-mm.
it has those sharp triangle edges around around just these sharp triangle edges around something like a 50-point star or something
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
And people were asked to assign names, and people chose Kiki for the star and Boba for the cloud. And it was like universal. It was significant.
Yeah, it was a very significant and a large effect size. The like
And the
the
large effect size.
perfect
Yeah.
grid, the corner that you want to be in.
And that's just cool because yeah, we were talking about this. There's that term for like words that just kind of like
Oh yeah, what is that?
sound like
What is it called? Do you
I
remember?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Oh, this
yeah.
is gonna kill. But like sludge,
Yeah, the
slug,
yeah,
trudge,
yeah,
smudge. Like these all are like kind of like they just have a vibe to them
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
humans or almost universally just are like, oh yeah, those words do feel a certain way. And I'm sure there are cultural differences too. The way we were looking at were only Western centric words, but I'm
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
it exists in every single language out there.
yeah. It is. It is weird to think what exactly is the unifying bond that makes that such a universal experience. I have no clue. I'm sure there are theories, but yeah, it's very
The gang discovers linguistics.
yeah. Dude, linguistics was crazy. Linguistics is actually one of those fields that's like very beautifully interdisciplinary because it's super top down in that like very human. We use language. It's extremely flexible, but also very bottom up. There are rules. There's grammar. There's like it's simultaneously both approaches, and I feel like there's not a lot of disciplines that are that harmonious in that way. Um,
When you can combine technicality with vibes, like it's just so fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love being I love seeing things from multiple angles when that's an opportunity. I like to think of myself as a very duality based person. I think it's important to my identity, and I think it's also like part of how I reason about the world.
Mm.
I should have done linguistics. That would have been cool. I don't know. Maybe not. I what was my I'm trying to think what's my apprehensive with linguistics. I think it's that I feel like I'm not good at languages, but I don't know. I think
Hmm.
I'd probably be fine.
Well, you are technically a polyglot, right? You know Spanish and
No,
English.
polyglots can speak a lot of languages. I can speak like one and a half languages, but yeah,
you're a monogamous glot.
yeah. We know someone who's basically a polyglot or on their way to be. Um,
Yeah. It's really cool with those languages too. Once you learn once you have two down like really solidly, you have like a framework for learning languages, which is
yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah. It'd be. I'm curious what the optimal spread of languages to learn would be if you want to touch on like the maximum number of like concepts. You know what I mean?
Right,
I feel
right.
like people would be like, okay, English. I feel like what English, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, and then probably some like esoteric language or something. But that's a complete guess. I
Get
have
get
no clue if that's even remotely right.
yeah, get some Basque in there, which is like a language that they've not been able to trace its roots to any other language. Like
Yeah.
most languages in the world, barring like I think a couple, all
Right,
have
right.
some form of connection. Like they all can like
Yeah,
relate to
the main
something
lines are
else.
what? It's like the Romance languages, the Germanic languages. Is it just Chinese? Is what you would say? Like, right? Because
I
East,
don't remember.
all
Yeah,
the
I
East
don't
Asian
know.
languages basically pull from Chinese, I believe. Something like
I
that.
believe
Yeah,
it.
we maybe we'll get a linguistic head on the pod one day. Give
Yeah.
us a little presentation. I would. Okay, this is what I'm gonna say. I am consistently intimidated by linguists. I think that's my
Mm.
hesitation. Every time I've met like a hardcore linguist in real life, I'm always like, oh man, this person. Here's the thing: linguists are always really witty. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but they're like looking for connections in such a multi-dimensional way. I worry about keeping up. Like it's fine, you know. In actuality, it's fine. But I remember like some point in my 20s being like, linguists are a type of person that I'm like, oh, like if someone's a linguist, I'm like, oh,
Respect. Nice.
yeah. Okay, I want to talk about, since we're talking about words, talking about language, I want to talk about connections. The New York Times daily game. We've been playing a little connections, you and I, Richard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think over the last 2 months, so I've played the connections every day for the last 2 months. I was also playing it before, but I think I was a lot more hardcore recently. And I think I've started to develop a lot of thoughts about connections. Oh, and for people who don't know, the way connections work, it's a word game. You're given a grid of words, 16 words. The ordering of them doesn't actually matter, so the grid element's kind of irrelevant. Um, and you're trying to find four groups that each contain four words that follow like coherence to them. So the category could be like farm animals, like rappers, uh, words for destroying things, and like words that are palindromes. I don't know. That's like four potential categories. Usually it goes from an easy category up to a hard category of different difficulties. I'm just curious as a pulse check, Richard, where are you at with connections right now?
I'm like a play it occasionally type person. It's one of those games too because it has an editor. Like it's not like obviously it's not auto generated. Like
Hmm.
you the thing about it is the more you play, I feel like the better you get. Not just
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
training your brain muscle, but you also kind of develop somewhat of a relationship with like the editor. It's the same thing with like crossword puzzles and stuff
Hmm.
too. You're at the mercy of the brain power of the eggheads at the New York Times.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think every single one, there's been very few times where I'm like, oh, that wasn't solvable. It's just like a matter of just figuring it out or like spending the time to like write it out or just revisiting a puzzle if you're feeling stuck type deal.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I wanted a baseline to to ground this conversation on connections for. Um, so the reason I remember I wrote this down as a topic for today because a tweet kind of went semi viral. I don't know what viral means nowadays, but it got traction on Twitter, and it was
Right.
complaining that a certain connections category was basically impossible. And it was a connections category that I think it was something like it like words that are like one letter away from being colors or something like that. Some word play based one. And the tweet was
Yeah.
basically like, this is impossible. Like no one would ever get this. And that was one of those categories I got like almost immediately.
Instantly. Yeah.
And that's not a brag. More that I want to talk about the fact that connections, like you're getting at, has a metagame that you need to learn. And if you learn it, the game gets a lot more interesting. And from the other side of things, as the constructor or the person who designs the connections puzzles, I have some thoughts. The New York Times connections editor, if you listen to this, if this gets to you, I have some thoughts on what makes for a good puzzle. Um, but I'll start from the front end. Um, I don't want to be like I remember you asked me like what I do, or somebody asked me what I do for connections, and I like kind of wrote out my thought process, and then you were like, "That doesn't sound very fun." I'm not trying to put you on blast.
Oh,
But
that was me.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
Having-
it was fine. What you do makes total sense.
yeah. I think
It-
seeing everything written out as like a checklist of things to do is not a very fun
Yeah.
way of approaching the puzzle. But that's not literally what I do. It's more like on reflection, it's like, all right, here are the things that I can do.
And in
Okay.
your explanation too, it was more than just solving the puzzle. It was also like the metagame checks and stuff you do, which makes it look like a lot harder because that stuff's now just all habits. But seeing it all written out, you're like, what the heck?
Yeah, so like things you should always do with connections is like I always check for basic wordplay, for example. That's why I got that category that was like the weird one. Because like really quick things to check: palindromes, anagrams, and just in general. Once you
Like homonyms too.
yeah,
Like,
homonyms,
there's
yeah,
all sorts.
homonyms, anagrams, and even like one letter replacements or stuff. There's once you start looking for wordplay, if you just is wordplay the right word I'm looking for? Wordplay, I guess, implies puns and stuff, but I'll say wordplay. Wordplay meaning like when the category is based on the structure or like pronunciation of the word. Just always look for that. Because once you start doing that, you'll start to realize that only certain types of words even qualify as like potential candidates for wordplay. Like lots of vowels, lots of common letters, I don't know, N's, S's, R's. I don't know exactly what it is, but you know it when you see it. Like shorter words that are like 4 letters, those are always going to be good candidates for wordplay. Everybody who thought that category is impossible, I promise, look for wordplay every time you play connections. You will start finding them really, really fast because the
Really
the
fast.
editor does not pick crazy words. The other ones you got to know: the blanks, blank word or word blank.
Yeah,
just putting
common
things-
common pairings.
Yeah.
Like the words are either the enders or the start of like
exactly.
multi-word phrases.
Look for things to put in front and behind words. Shared definition is a really common basic category. I always look for like, are there 4 words here that just mean the same thing? That's very obvious, but like if you haven't looked for that, you should look for that. And I guess I could keep rattling off things. I realize I don't want to be like, oh, here's a tutorial on how to play connections. But those are just a couple like tips to keep in mind. But from the editor's perspective, there are some things that I think can be changed. So I've been making connections puzzles. I haven't made a ton. I made like 10 maybe. But I think
You've made more in your life. I think you've made even more than 10, to be honest.
yeah, probably more than 10 total. But I think as I made them, I've gotten better and better at constructing them.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because tuning the difficulty is tricky and stuff. But okay, this is for the NYT editor now. First thing, red herrings. So sometimes you'll have a category So categories are 4 words, but sometimes there might be multiple words that can fit into the category, like 5 words that can fit in the category, or 6 words that can fit in the category. Red herrings are a way to make the puzzle more difficult. And I think initially my belief was red herrings are good because they force you to think forward. And I think connections is more fruitful when you start thinking forwardly. It just seeing the puzzle is not just like layers, but as the whole thing. I think is the true way, in my opinion, of playing connections. It's when you start being able to reason out the categories without like just finding them point blank and knowing them. Because sometimes you won't be able to find a category, but through the like gestalt of the other categories, you can. Um, that being said, I'm starting to feel more and more that red herrings are just not very fun, even though they increase the difficulty. Because once you know that red herrings exist and that you have to account for them, they just kind of artificially expand the possibility space by making you search down like extra branches. I don't know. It makes it feel a little fiddly, like you're accounting for this extra variable. I think sometimes it's good, but here's my proposed alternative. I think red herrings, not very fun, but themes are fun and they're easier to quickly dismiss than red herrings are. Um, so a theme is what I would call when a group of words share like an idea, but it's not strong enough to be a category. Like there was one connections that New York Times did where there's like the words sponge, bob, square, and pants, right? There were those 4 words. And some people I'm sure would think that's a category. But if you've played enough connections, you know that the category is not just spelling out a phrase or something, right? So you can be distracted by it. It does make it a little bit harder because your brain like latches onto that combination. But it's also easy to just be like, but this isn't what the clue is going to be. It just adds some flavor. They do themes sometimes, but when I make connections, I always include a theme now because I think always including a theme just gives a little bit more delight, makes the puzzle a little bit more challenging, but isn't annoying or like weird. I don't know. Do you think you agree with that, Richard?
Yeah, I definitely do. And like I think one red herring is fine, but when you start having multiple category red herrings, it starts to just you basically
Yeah,
it
yeah,
almost
yeah.
feels like you're playing like Sudoku because you're like in the sense that with Sudoku, you have to like in those boxes you have to write like 6, 4, 3 like it's just a lot of mental logistics to take
Yeah,
care of
yeah, yeah,
for a
yeah.
game that you should be able to just do on the fly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's okay for there to be some Sudoku, but I don't think you want having to Sudoku to be one of the main things you have to do. And that's yeah, like I
Yeah.
agree. When there's more than one red herring, that's often what happens. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier. It becomes fiddly, like you're saying. You can't write in the numbers like you can in Sudoku, so you are just forced to track that in your head, and it's I don't know. It's like cognitive load for the sake of cognitive load. I feel. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I think I'm gonna go 2 more things for the editor. Hello, editor of New York Times. I know you're not gonna see this, but I just I need to get these ideas out. Um, so I think it's really bad when puzzles do what I call doubling up on trivia, which is where
Mm.
you need to know 2 types of trivia in order to get the categories. This is something again, like the things I'm talking about don't happen all the time, but they happen sometimes, and I think they should happen very rarely. But I
Yeah.
think trivia, getting a connection because you know trivia, for example, the name of rappers, I think should be a reward to getting through the puzzle a little bit faster, but should not be in what is the word? Impediment? Impediment?
Because it also makes the puzzle more accessible because if you
Yeah.
get the first 3 categories, even if you don't know the last one, you're confident in the first 3, so
Yeah.
you're good. But if you don't know 2 and if you don't know 8, then that's just like that. The mental load there is brutal.
Yeah, exactly. And in my opinion, it becomes just impossible if the trivia is like loaded up too heavily. Um, so I always think that like the trivia need. I wish I could be more specific about this, but I've noticed that when you play certain puzzles and when I've like test run puzzles with you guys, sometimes I realize like, oh, this is a knowledge gap that requires it needs to be filled in too much for the puzzle to be fun. When it is filled in, the puzzle is fun, but it's just an automatically exclusionary like type of category to include. So I think you
Yeah.
you have to have only not that you can only have one trivia, but if you're gonna have like hard trivia or esoteric trivia, you only get one. And the same applies to definitions of words because that's basically trivia for like weird esoteric words.
To take this back to right before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about how you shouldn't be saying to people in casual conversation, "Oh, you didn't know that?"
Yeah.
And when I see 2 rows of trivia, that's like the NY Times editors just peak faux pas. Like,
Oh, dude.
"Oh, you didn't know that?"
I feel the same way when I go on like the Connections subreddit to like see people's opinions and like somebody gets a full clear that I didn't because I didn't know like because I got knowledge gapped and they're just like, oh, like
Yeah.
I thought everybody knew this. I'm like, well, but I didn't.
Yeah.
You're this is hostile communication that's happening towards me right now. um but yeah, and I think I don't know. What I'm saying, I think I'm guessing everything I'm saying. The editor understands and knows. Um, but it's because it's hard to know what people know and don't know. We were just talking about that. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to think about the different categories as like ways of unlocking what happens next, and you should consider what the failure cases can be. Where if certain knowledge doesn't exist, is the puzzle now in like impossible to complete? And that definitely happens sometimes. And you're never going to make a puzzle that's not going to be the case for at least some people. But I don't feel like it. I feel like it could be minimized more. Um, although I don't know, I feel like we're in a new arc of the editor right now. By the way, last month had some funky stuff, but the last couple of weeks have started to shift in vibe. I can tell the editor is experimenting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes the Wordle ain't even a Wordle. Sometimes it's leggy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know. It's so fun, kind of like when you've been playing puzzles for long enough, you kind of like get to like suss out. You're like, oh man, like did the editor have a bad day or something?
yeah. Okay,
You get this like weird parasocial intimacy with them, and like it's fun.
yeah, dude, yeah, yeah. They're giving their expression of what they think the world is like to you through their puzzle. Okay, last one. The NYT is pretty good about this, but sometimes they're not. So I think there are is it four? There's four types of categories. These are not fully encompassing, but they are one ones, fours, three ones, and two twos. And let me give some examples. So, if the part of speech for all four words is identical, that's a four. Okay. Or that's just a wait, what did I say? 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, and a four. Yeah, that's four categories. So if it's all the same, so for example, if everything is the exact same past tense, I'm trying to think like if it's like eaten, beaten, these are all gonna rhyme now, but like
Seaton.
I picked a terrible word to start with. You know what I'm saying, right? Like
Yeah.
enjoying, frolicking, running, like jumping. Those are two semantically related beyond just like the part of speech, but like those are all the same. Um, or if it's like singular, 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 or plural, 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 plural. So fours, that's the cleanest type of category. A 1-1-1-1 where everything is clearly part of the same category, but is all distinct, I think is the second cleanest type of category. Then 2-2s, then 3-1s. I personally believe 3-1s should almost never happen because it's just inelegant. And NYT slips in 3-1s every few days, and I think it should just like almost never happen. And they can be defended, and I don't think they're invalid, but I don't think they're fun either. So
What would be an example of 3-1s?
an example of there's a recent one where it was spoilers alert. What was so the category was things that have keys, and the options were tests, keyboard, or I think it was has keys. That was the category.
Yeah.
And the answers was
Piano, maybe.
tests plural, keyboard, oh, what was the other ones? Some other ones. But basically it was singular, 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 plural. And the reasoning was because a single test has a single key, so you need multiple tests to have multiple keys. But by adding that plural, it turned the category into a 3-1, and I'm not with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough.
I don't know. I don't like it. It every time there's a 3-1, I get a little bit salty. And I see people on the subreddit, they always point out, "Oh, but this one's kind of out of place," and people can explain it. The NYT Connections is never invalid. The categories are always valid because, you know, it's a professional publication. They're going to publish real solvable puzzles, but the enjoyment of it, you know, cleanliness, elegance, I think is what we want. So,
Yep, makes sense.
there you go. I don't actually think everything I shared was that insightful. Again, I think the editor knows everything I was talking about. But those are my Connections gripes. Anything you wanted to add? Any
Fair
other
enough.
thoughts, Richard?
No, I think all good here. This has been really nice, and I'm looking forward to more of them, more of these
Yeah.
podcasts.
I think it was a nice pod. I think I had a good time. Thanks for joining us, viewers and listeners. I maybe I'll have a new thing to say at the end. What's a new thing? Okay, here's my thing right now, and then we'll wrap. I've been thinking a lot about how it is important to not know things because you can't know everything. So by necessity, you must not know things, and it is to your advantage to be aware of how you do not know things. Did that make sense what I just said?
Be aware of how you do not know things.
I'll phrase it another way.
Sure.
Because you will, out of just inherence, because you will inherently not know things.
Yeah.
You have agency in picking and choosing what you don't know.
Sure.
And so it is good to be thoughtful of what you are choosing not to know for a whole medley of reasons.
Yeah.
And I guess the message there is you don't know something, great. You choose what you don't know and feel confident in not knowing in knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not very hopeful or motivating, I guess, but to me it is. To me it is because it's I feel like somebody who compulsively feels like they need to know things, and being like, no, it's okay to not know things, and I'm in control of that. I have agency over that. I think is good. So for now, we'll say that in the podcast. Remember to not know things. I don't know. We'll find a better wording. All right. Thanks for joining me today, Richard.
Of course.
Did we
goodbye
not
now.
hello yes the intro?
I don't know.
Okay, if we didn't, we have to next time. But for now, goodbye no.
Goodbye now.